Are you a leader, manager, entrepreneur, business owner, or knowledge worker? Are you leading people and wondering how to be a better leader in your own life and work? If you are, then you could be thinking about experimenting differently. Join us on the Experimental Leader podcast and take a look at the ways leaders are experimenting in their own lives. Hosted by Melanie Parrish and Mel Rutherford, we dive into real-life conversations about how people might be using a scientist mindset experimenting in their work. Shift your leadership into something more innovative. Join us on the Experimental Leader podcast today. Hello.
Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Melanie Parrish, and welcome to the Experimental Leader podcast. I'm one of your hosts.
I'm Mel Rutherford, and I'm also one of your hosts. Thanks for coming here today.
Well, I've been thinking, when we think about doing our podcast, one of the things that I started doing a couple of years ago was to start trying to have interesting guests. And some of that was to not have just the same 60-year-old white men on our podcast all the time. I wanted to share our platform with all sorts of voices. So queer voices, women voices, people of color. And today I am so excited about the guests that we have on our show because we have Indigenous composers coming on our show today. And it just feels like and that I've been able to open to a variety of things and just to keep saying yes. So I'm super excited, and I feel like I want to just keep saying yes to all that the world has to offer in terms of interesting perspectives, new perspectives, and just to keep learning.
And the people we're having on today are a group of people that are meeting each other for the first time and are preparing for a concert that's coming up in our local community.
I know, it's kind of crazy. It's all kind of crazy. In our community, we're going to go to the concert.
Yeah.
You and me. We're going to wear good shoes and look cute, and it's going to be fun. Our friends should go too. It'll be fun. What are you thinking about in your leadership right now?
I am thinking about apologies. I'm thinking about the power of the apology, especially from a leadership perspective. Because as leaders, we always try our best and we always try to do no harm. And sometimes we mess up, and sometimes we hurt people unintentionally. And then people will come to us and say, I was unhappy when you did this, and I was offended when you did this, and we get our hackles up, and we want to say, well, we might want to say, I'm the boss, and so I can do whatever I want, or we might want to double down and defend our decision and say, I did it because da 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 da. But sometimes the quickest way to heal is actually to start with the apology. I hear you. I made a mistake. I am sorry. I'm sorry that this impacted you the way it did, and I'm learning. And thank you for bringing this to my attention. And sometimes just starting with the apology is the quickest way to make people know that you're taking care of them and you're willing to listen.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting thing to be thinking about.
What about you? What are you thinking about?
Well, I was thinking about that whole thing I said at the beginning about, bringing who we bring on the podcast and the work of it. It's not easy. But I was also thinking about when you said apologies, I was thinking about we're married, so how apologies flow, at home too. And I guess it made me think that in the same vein that apologies are so useful, so is just getting over it. So is accepting the apology, and so is not getting in a snit and just being mad. And so is just having thick skin sometimes. All those things are really good for leadership too. It's not all about, I try to remember it's not all about me. people are doing the best they can. That's been my thought for the last kind of, 4 years with COVID. People are doing the best they can. I try to remind myself of that pretty regularly because I don't think people always behave all that well. So I think both. I think it's yes and. Yes, apologies. And I think you can't demand an apology, even though you want to sometimes. I am super excited about our guest today. And I want to start by introducing Jeffrey Pollack. He's a conductor who's celebrated for his musical versatility and captivating concert programming. He's been recognized by the League of American Orchestras, and Jeffrey has led prestigious orchestras across North America, such as the Detroit Symphony, Houston Symphony, and more. He's also collaborated with virtuoso artists and made his mark in the world of opera. He's now back as the musical director for Sinfonia Ancaster, where his talent continues to shine. Welcome to the show, Jeffrey Pollack.
Welcome,
Thank you,
Jeff.
Melanie. Thank you, Melanie. Hello, Mel.
It's great to have you here today. And I am super excited about a concert that you are doing this month. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Sinfonia Ancaster, which is the orchestra I conduct in Ancaster, Ontario, which is a suburb of Hamilton. This is the second year that the orchestra is in its performing arts center. And when I was planning the season, I thought we were so grateful and happy to be in this arts center. And then I thought we should just do something to really, kind of express that gratitude. And then I began to think about the land on which the arts center sits. And I realized, and I, of course, been aware that in Canada, people have been saying land acknowledgments for the last several years. And those words came into my mind, land acknowledgement. And I thought, why don't we do a concert that is centered on acknowledging the land on which we're standing? And rather than have a small thing that organization would say at the beginning, we would have an entire concert focused on where we are. And I then reached out to a woman named Barbara Asiganak, who ended up connecting with me. Barbara is a great composer, Anishinaabe, and she connected me with the composers whose music we're playing. And we are playing, I'll introduce them in a second, but we are playing their pieces on the second half of the concert. And we are also playing on the first half of the concert, the music of Beethoven, his Sixth Symphony. And all of the composers, all of the pieces that Spy, Dawn, Catherine, and Jessica have written, all incorporate nature and land to some degree in their works, which I find really fascinating. And so we are showcasing a number of different composers who take part in the land, benefit from it, and have a deep appreciation for it. We are all of the works on the concert are acknowledging land. And specifically the composers that we have are, two of them are from nations on which Ancaster Arts Center sits, Anishinaabe and Mohawk. Would it be all right if I introduce them, Melanie?
Yeah, sure.
Excellent.
Do you want to introduce them one at a time, and we can sort of talk about each piece?
As you wish. So let me first start with, we'll first start with Dawn Avery. Dawn Avery is someone who Barbara connected me to. Dawn is from Mohawk Nation, Turtle Clan. And Dawn is a Grammy-nominated world music artist, full professor at Montgomery College in Rockville, Maryland, where she runs a world music program. And Dawn has written a piece specifically for our concert. And the name of the piece, which she has written for us, is called Indian Territory Ancaster. Hi, Dawn.
Welcome, Dawn.
Hello, nice to see everybody. Thanks, Mel, Melanie, Jeffrey, and Barbara for getting me involved in this great project. And I'm delighted to write a piece. I know you often in your podcast talk about leadership and innovation. So I'll just talk briefly about that. The piece invokes the ancestors of the land, both Anishinaabeg and Haudenosaunee. And part of the way it does that is through indigenous soundscapes, such as the sound of rattles or an actual rattle, the sound of the drum, the sound of the wind, the sound of the ancestors walking along the land. And then I actually asked the orchestra to get a little maybe out of their comfort zone, I don't know, by invoking the names of the main chiefdoms, basically, the main nations, so that that ancient sound of who they are is also vibrating with the land.
Mm.
Interesting.
I'm so excited about this concert. I cannot even, I can't believe I get this opportunity to ask you questions. What was it like for you to approach this project?
I think when Jeffrey approached me to have land acknowledgement, right away I just thought of the people. And there's so many ways to acknowledge land, but I wanted to acknowledge the first peoples of this land, and because they're alive today as well. And invoking names or any ancient, any of our languages is very powerful musically, as is a symphonic orchestra.
Mm.
I imagine, I mean, I'm very impressed that you created a new piece for this concert. Is that unusual? Is that a lot of work to put something new together for an invitation?
Well, it was great to work with Jeffrey because he was very helpful, because I was not planning on writing a new piece, but as I was looking at older pieces, and I just realized that I had to do something new for him. I was very impressed by his attention to detail and his excitement, and then the whole program idea. I was like, no, I have to write them their own piece. So it's always a lot of work, but for me, composing is like the deepest meditation, and especially if it's for my people, the fact that it's in the territory is fantastic. I hope to bring a lot of people, and some of whom have never seen a symphonic orchestra. So I think it's a very special moment that I get to be part of, and I'm really glad about that.
Mm. Wow.
Jeffrey, what do you want to introduce next?
Okay, Melanie and Mel, I'd like to introduce you to two composers at the same time. The first is Spy Denome Welch, who is Anishinaabe. Spy is the Associate Professor and Canada Research Chair in Critical Policy, Equity, and Leadership Studies at Western University. And he's also the Artistic Director of Unsettled Scores, which is an independent performing arts production company that he co-founded with his composing partner, Catherine McGowan, Catherine is a bassoonist, a composer, and arts administrator, and also, interestingly, I did not know this about you, Catherine, is the co-founder of the world's first electric bassoon band. Okay. And she and Spy have presented at conferences on topics such as decolonization and intercultural collaboration in music, and they run workshops for youth and young adults on music creation and the politics of music. And Sinfonia is pleased to perform two of their pieces. One is called Rouge Winter, and the other is called Bottlenecked. So I introduce you to Spy and Catherine.
Welcome, Spy and Catherine.
Yeah, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, likewise. It's good to be here.
What was it like for you, or what's important about being a part of this for you?
Well, I guess I'll take a moment to just say I really enjoy the opportunity to have works enjoyed and performed by different groups and different ensembles and within different regions as well. We have two pieces, as Jeffrey had just mentioned, one of which is really local, actually, to the region. It sort of addresses some of the issues around water and water conservation, preservation, and situated within the Grand River itself. And the other is, in its own right, another kind of river, the Rouge River. We situate that whole piece that we're thinking of, the storytelling in that work all around the Rouge itself. And so I'll just pass it to Catherine, who may have have a few comments about this as well.
Yeah, Rouge River was really exciting for us to create because it's based in Scarborough, Ontario, which is my hometown, and a lot of my early experiences with wildlife and nature are from the what is now the Rouge Urban National Park. So we were asked to write that piece for Scarborough Philharmonic Orchestra, which I played with for a very long time in my formative years. And so we were asked to compose that for their 40th anniversary a few seasons ago. And with Bottlenecked, it was first performed by Nota Bene, which is based in Kitchener-Waterloo, for a concert all about the Grand River. And that land is very close to Ancaster as well. And a lot of the sort of issues with around water conservation would impact that area as well.
Mm. That's it's interesting to I'm really fascinated by the lens that people put over composing, and it's interesting to hear that that water is the one of the things that one of your lenses, I think.
For that piece in particular, Melanie, I think I'll just elaborate on it. It's the piece is about the journey of a single droplet of water, from its formation in the clouds to joining other water in the Grand River until it's finally taken out and rudely taken out of its environment and then bottled and sold. Hence, bottlenecked. It's a journey.
Interesting. I'm not a musician myself, but I can imagine that water would lend itself to being brought to life in music.
Yeah, totally. It does. And it's really interesting to explore that in terms of sound and the ways we can have that represented through the colors of different instruments. And similarly with Rouge Winter, we are really interested in the sound of snow, which is basically just a solid form of water, and all the life forms that inhabit that space. So it really could capture our imagination, but also take a very compassionate look at the welfare of other beings and other kin that we have in our midst, and to be very aware of these environmentally significant areas are really critical to our ecosystem, and more importantly, that we think about how we engage and interact with them, and be mindful of being of the boundaries that we need to sort of create to respect that space as well.
I'm curious, because this is a leadership podcast too. I'm curious about, as you're composing together, how does the flow of leadership work in your partnership?
Well, I'll take the opportunity to say here that anything that has Indigenous content in it, I always defer to SPY, and anything that would, if we took on any projects that would have culturally relevant themes that are from my ancestry, I'm sure he would defer to me as well. But beyond that, we like to try, one of the things that we try to do with Unsettled Scores when we're working with other artists, and it sort of comes up in our working relationship as well, is just try to level out hierarchies as much as we can. Obviously, there are people who would have, the final say. If we're doing an opera, the set person has to have the final say. We can't keep tweaking right to the end, but we like to have a lot of dialogue and try to work towards sort of a consensus building model. And that sort of happens in our working relationship as well. Wouldn't you say, Spy?
Yeah, I completely agree. You said it so perfectly. And also it's a really amazing way to learn from somebody else as well as teach. So there's a really good reciprocal approach to leadership, and also the sharing of responsibilities. I think that's helpful, and also ways of getting some feedback into soundboard, some of the intricacies of challenging topics or situations you could work through more mindfully, getting almost immediate feedback from someone else.
Well-
Jeffrey, should we introduce Jessica?
Sure, I'll go ahead and take that on, Mel. Thank you. And the composer who's coming from the furthest west is Jessica McMahon. I mentioned Barbara earlier in the podcast. Barbara was initially was going to have some of her music performed, but actually ultimately schedules didn't line up, and she suggested Jessica as somebody else. I had wanted to keep the composers from nations on which the Ancaster Center sits, but that was, given our time constraints, that was somewhat hard to do. So we expanded our lens, and I'm so glad we did, because I became acquainted with Jessica McMahon, who is from Cree Nation, and she lives in Calgary. She is a multidisciplinary artist, and her work fuses together traditional language and dance with her own contemporary experiences as an Indigenous woman and two-spirit person. And we are playing a piece of hers called Musqua's Mountain Home.
Welcome, Jessica.
Welcome.
There we go. Thanks. I'm really happy to be here. My piece is called Musqua's Mountain Home.
Oh, Musqua.
And
Thank you.
it was commissioned by the Calgary Philharmonic. Many thanks to Chris Darkson, who recommended me for that project of Alberta composers. And I had a theme to compose around, and it was the theme of home, and I really struggled with that. It was the Four Seasons. That got me in a Vivaldi head, and I couldn't get out of that, and so I ended up looking at it more broad, which was the theme of home, instead of the Four Seasons. And so I had to really think about what was home to me. As a 60 Scoop adoptee, home can be very complicated. And so I took a look at the things around me and beings around me, actually, and the places that I felt really good in, and that included a very specific portion of southern Alberta called the Highwood Pass. And in the Highwood Pass, there's Grizzly Peak, and there's a hike that I really like doing called Ptarmigan Cirque. And there, it's usually always closed because of grizzly bears. And I really thought about how also the prompt I had a story about a grizzly bear in it. So I was thinking about the bears and a bear and her cubs. And so that really informed the entire piece, from the sound to including bringing in twigs for the musicians to use as instruments, which is also probably out of their comfort zone. I'm sure a violinist does not want to hear that sound ever. But to really emulate the sound of, like, when you're walking in the woods and you can hear maybe a bear that's too busy eating and stepping on twigs instead of being silent. And just kind of really bringing that calming essence of the freezing winds of the Highwood Pass and that home that is to the bear. My home is in southern Alberta. I live in Cochrane now, and I was adopted out from Cowessess First Nation in Saskatchewan, and those themes of home are very important to me because I have worked very hard to meet my family and know where I come from, and I have good relationships with my family there, except for my birth mom. So a lot of my work is informed by that, as well as trying to reclaim my language as well.
And Jessica, I know what 60 Scoop is, but I'm not sure all of our listeners would know. Would you mind just
Yeah, of course. So the 60 Scoop was a very specific time in the history of this country, between 1960 and 1993, where Indigenous kids were forcibly removed from their homes and placed in white homes to be raised as non-Native kids.
Thank you for that.
Melanie, can I respond to just two things from
Yes,
our composers
please.
about certain things that have made musicians uncomfortable. I'm just happy to share a thing or two in response to their work. Each of the composers' pieces that we're playing have cocked some eyebrows, but it's fine. Jessica and her twigs is what I mean. You should see Jessica the Discord chats going on of how people even collecting and amassing twigs. And we're going to have to talk with you about this. What timber twig are you looking for? Because we have, linden. There's a whole bunch of twigs that I've actually got in the back of my car as we prepare for a dress rehearsal to have musicians do that. And there's all this talk about, well, we have to make sure the twigs are dried out so that they actually have a really good crack. I mean, people are taking this very seriously. Spy and Catherine, you mentioned about walking in the snow for Rouge Winter. Of all of the effects that we've had to produce, I think the creation of the snow effect has been one of the most challenging. Melanie, what they have asked to do is have the string players use their bows against the strings, but instead of producing notes, to create this gentle scraping sound, which, when with all of the string instruments together, creates this simulating the walking in snow. It took us a while to get there, Spy and Catherine, I have to say, because most of the time musicians that take the violin, they produce a note. And so we're actually telling them to, no, don't produce a note. And
let's just invite everyone back on camera if we're going to talk about all the pieces.
Oh, sure.
I should invite them all back.
And Dawn's piece and Dawn's piece, actually, the speaking of the names of the nations was absolutely fine. I worked on make sure the pronunciation is exactly correct. That didn't trouble people so much as figuring out how to actually make the sounds of wind that you had from all of the brass instruments, and also these key clacks that you ask for in the soundscapes. Dawn actually asks the woodwind instruments and the brass instruments to instead of using the sounds they conventionally make, to use their woodwind keys to make a clicking sound, to using the trumpet valves to make a clicking sound. And this has raised an eyebrow or two. So each of these pieces that I'm happy to say is expanding the playing techniques of our players, who are doing things in an interesting and challenging way, and their game, but it is new. Anything new and innovative is there's going to be a learning curve, and the players are really, really liking work on all of your pieces, and I'm so grateful that your works will all be showcased. Melanie, I want to say something else before taking the focus off me, is that we are so thrilled at Sinfonia Ancaster that all of the people you see here present are going to be with us for the concert. Mm-hmm. So Jessica's coming from Alberta, Dawn is coming up, or she lives in Maryland, and Spy and Catherine are coming up from London, Ontario. So they'll be all here, all acknowledging this land, or the land that Jessica is writing about from Alberta. And we precede this with Beethoven, which your listeners may not know. The symphony we're playing is the Sixth Symphony, which Beethoven expressly wrote, hundreds of years ago, about the joy that he felt from nature, and his express representations of circling back to water. What's it like to be on the water? What are the feelings that I have when I go out into nature? And then what is the terror of being in a thunderstorm? And then the gratitude that we feel when the storm is past. And so all of these pieces I really like how they're bouncing off of each other as we put them together, all about humans' experience with different aspects of nature, or in Jessica's case, the experience of bears, experience with its natural habitat.
I think I understand this, but I want to check with you, all of you, but I think mostly you, Jeff. The order of the pieces means something in a program. Is that correct? Like like playing Beethoven in the first, before intermission, it makes it more weighty that these pieces are being played in the second half. Is that correct?
I think so, yes. Well, oftentimes, and I see how orchestras program, and of course you all can speak better to this. New music, strange new works that people haven't heard before, tend to be put on the first half of a concert as orchestras play that, and then get to the meat or the big work in the concert. And so Actually talking with Catherine was a great dialogue that we had about, well, let's put Beethoven first.
So
And
Beethoven,
let's
warm up band.
Beethoven is the warm-up band, so that
Yeah.
we are privileging the works of all the composers who are alive, and many of whom are from these nations.
Yeah.
So reversing that paradigm.
I want to ask all of the composers, like what it means to have a program like this. What does it mean for you? What you think it means for Ancaster or for the symphony? Like, what does it mean that this is happening?
I think one thing that's important to me in research and recordings I've done over the years is that as Indigenous people, we do everything. And we're also classical composers, and we do blues and we do hip hop. And so to represent in that way is really important, I think, especially to youth. And then also to represent the fact that that we're here and we're really intelligent. You all sound very intelligent. I'm so excited. And that we all have very different voices. We're not all the same. So I think that there's a lot of stuff that's happening underneath and above, many layers.
I'm so moved by what you just said. You know, we went to a screening last night at the Performance Center about a residential school. And it's important that that story get told, but it's also important that the voices of people who are succeeding, who are soaring, who are amazing contributors in the world gets told as well. And so I'm just so touched by what you said, because I think it's when a group is marginalized in some way, we have to remember not to just tell the marginalized story. Like it's so I love that so much.
I have a may I ask a question, Melanie?
Well, I want to hear from everyone.
Sure.
I actually want to hear from everyone on this.
Yeah. Okay.
What does this mean to you?
I'll just jump in to say I'm pleased to be having work presented next to Dawn and Jessica. To be really frank, it's nice to see dynamic and diverse voices in a program like this, as opposed to just one-offs. I think it's really nice. I think it's very important to see our work expressed alongside each other. And so for me, that's just a really exciting opportunity to see that and to be present next to these wonderful artists as well.
Cool. Thanks. It's for me, every time that somebody wants to play my music is a big deal. I came from a very rough music education, and I did not start composing until, I guess it would have been late 2019, early 2020 when Chris made me do it. And so Chris Dixon is a Cree cellist in Canada and a good friend of mine. And so I started, and then this commission came along, and this is my first orchestral piece. And so the momentum that this adds to it is huge for me personally. This will be the third performance of it, and there will be another one in the future. And so for me, that is like just beyond anything I could have ever imagined as a young flute student in university that just left music for 8 years and abandoned it because it was so terrible. So for me, it's just like, and then to see other Indigenous composers having this, like, unfortunately in the music world, the orchestral commission usually carries more weight. And so to have that support and just to be all on the same program, I'm very fortunate that my first orchestral piece was in a concert of only Indigenous composers writing for orchestra. So I was like, that was like huge. And to see the momentum continue to other institutions it feels really good. And to have a piece that's played more than once is also really, really good. That feels like fantastic that that there's the support is gaining and that we're starting to be, I mean, I don't know about either of you, but for me, I can't just compose something without a commission because I can't afford it, and two, I don't have the time because I'm too busy like hustling so to get work and to do things. And so I'm not like I have very commission focused, which is also a privilege as well because not everybody can just work off of commissions either. I understand that. But to have this have the continuance of everything is just really, really awesome. And I think I've connected with Spy before over email a few years ago, but I'm really also always happy to see other Indigenous composers because I don't know, it's just exciting. It's like it feels new and fresh and like there's a wave rolling in that's unstoppable.
I mean, I have to say, like, Beethoven's cool, but you guys are like inspiring, like, and relevant, like, people I'd like to have a beer with, and it's
Melanie,
maybe I'll get to, like, I mean, it's just very, very cool. And I feel like I'm walking on sacred ground as we, are having this conversation. I feel incredibly privileged.
Melanie, I'm going to have to run, but I just want to say one thing. I mean, I just have to go, but echoing what I've heard said, and this is important. I'm glad Jessica and Spy brought this up. Is that traditionally, not conventionally, there will be one piece of new music on an orchestral concert. That's as much, and so to have this concert, and like the concert that Jessica referred to, I think that's one thing that really sets this apart, is that there is a collection of pieces of composers who are all alive, all connected to the land and connected to most in this place. That's what I think sets this program apart from others, and what our musicians feel particularly inspired by. I have to tell you, all four of you, they're loving the work on it, and they're so excited that you're coming. They're really honored that you'll be joining us, and they're taking it all very seriously.
Thanks for being here, Jeffrey, and
yeah, of course.
I'm looking forward to seeing the concert.
And excellent. Catherine, I want to give you a chance to comment as well. I don't want to leave you out, for sure.
Yeah, well, anytime a piece gets played is very exciting because, the orchestra is a unit, but it's made up of individuals. So every time it's played, everybody's putting something of themselves into it. So every time a piece is played, it transforms into something else. And that's always the most exciting part of it for me.
Well, it seems like if, everybody has to go, I guess we have to stop talking. But what a joy to be with all of you. I'll be there. So I'm sure hoping I get to meet you all in person. And I can't wait. Like, I am just so excited. So thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy lives to be on my podcast or Mel and my podcast. He just started co-hosting and I have to change all my language, but thank you for being on our podcast. We're super excited that you were here today.
Thanks for coming today. And I really look forward to seeing the concert and to meeting all of you at the concert.
Thank you, Miigwech.
Thank you, everybody. Looking forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Experimental Leader. We hope you have found value in today's episode because we're dedicated to helping you become the experimental leader you want to be. To access the show notes or learn more, visit melanieparish.com. Go experiment.